Del Rio, Texas. Rob Wade and Robert Garza. Two guys who dive. This episode of Two Guys Who Dive recorded live Saturday, 13 April 2013, episode 63, The Taxman Cometh. Well, welcome once again to another exciting episode of Two Guys Who Dive, and I am, without a doubt, your host, Rob Wade. And as you probably know, if you've been following the podcast, you know that my co-host, Scuba Bob, a.k.a. Bobby Flamingo, Robert Garza, is not here. He's got a big event he's doing with his church, and I fully support that, so I'm excited for him. But so that means I'm flying solo. And you might also recall that we, a couple of weeks ago, when Robert was out as well, we had our sometimes co-host Troy McGonagill here, but he is out of town with the family on an exciting little situation or adventure, if you will, that we'll talk a little bit about in just a few moments, and we'll share that. But in late breaking news, we found out this week that the city of Del Rio was in fact going to do a citywide cleanup. Of course, the way the weather looks today, I'm surprised anybody's out doing anything. It's kind of dreary outside, but they actually did plan on doing something. Unfortunately, they didn't get the word out until Wednesday of this week, which of course does most of us no good at all. In my opinion, it just speaks again to the broken processes that are permeating the city of Del Rio. Unfortunately, if you want to have this kind of event and have the kind of participation that you really should have for a cleanup, you need to plan this months ahead and advertise it, share it in every medium you possibly can. Clearly, they didn't. I got the word, I got a text from my co-host on Wednesday saying, hey, because he works for the school district, that the school district just found out about it. So, and they were telling, I guess, the school kids so they could set up different places they could meet to do the cleanup in different parts of the city. Unfortunately, that kind of time doesn't give us really any leeway to get a hold of divers and try and put together a really good effort. I mean, Robert and I would know, and then we could go out there with the trailer and pick up some stuff from San Felipe Creek, but it really doesn't help. It doesn't really help us get the word out so we can get other folks involved. I know a number of divers that might not dive out the lake right about now because the temperatures are still pretty chilly. Oh, excuse me while I bring up our our mini co-host, Ronan. Come here. Make your appearance. Say hi to everybody. Here we go. Do your obligatory. Oh, come on, you can do better than that. That's funny. He's doing really well. He was, of course, having back problems, but he's doing really well. Of course, because we spoiled him, he now expects us to do everything for him, so poor guy. So anyway, excuse me. Unfortunately, what this means is we don't, even though we know a number of divers who might not dive out at Lake Amistad at this time of the year yet, even though it's really warming up, the temperature, the air-wise, the lake itself is still pretty chilly, and they're not likely to rush out to dive. But San Felipe Creek, which is spring fed. It's constant temperature about 74 to 76 year round. So we're more likely to get folks out there. I'm playing with some color adjustments here. We're more likely to get divers out for that because you could get away with just wearing a 3 mil shorty at the creek. We always have a great success with that, with the cleanups there. But again, when you only get a couple of days, people have already got other things planned. If you know this is happening well ahead, months ahead, then we can do a much better job of helping get the word out as a dive club and getting more participants. You know, the thing is with doing these kinds of cleanups, it's not just when we're working the creek, it's not just about the diving, although we certainly thoroughly enjoy the diving. It's not just about that. It's also about getting folks who can help us on the shore, because a number of the things that we end up pulling out of the creek can be quite heavy, or they're so mired in the silts and the plant life that's on the bottom of the creek that I don't care how many divers you get, you're not going to pull it out. You know, we've pulled a number of shopping carts, etc., out of there. So we really need help, by the way, of, you know, folks that are working the shore that we can drag stuff to or help us connect when the city is available to help us. They bring the big trucks with chains and everything, and we chain to some of this stuff that's buried out there and pull it out. So unfortunately, once again, cities' broken processes put them in a situation when we were not able to help them out, which is a shame, because it's a lot of work, but we really enjoy doing that kind of cleanup for the city. So the title of the episode this week is The Taxman Cometh. Well, it's April 13th and soon to be April 15th. And I understand from some news reports that Tax Freedom Day is coming quite a bit later this year. And if you're not sure, if you're not aware of what Tax Freedom Day is, it's the day where most people will no longer be working to pay their taxes, but they'll now be working for themselves. And by that I mean, if you're paying X amount of dollars a year for taxes, it takes you up to approximately tax day. Actually, it's been a week or so before tax day, where you have made enough money just to pay off your taxes. It's kind of like buying a house where excuse me, where most of your house payment is initially, for the first half at least, is going mostly towards the interest, and then it starts shifting towards the principal. So but now this year it's several days later, I think a couple of weeks later, which is kind of depressing, meaning that your taxes are due on the 15th, but after the 15th, you're still paying for your taxes for the following year. That's just sad. I was watching, digressing just a little bit, I was watching Fox Business Channel this morning, and one of their business shows were talking about tax rates, etc., and how the president said, "Oh, well, you're not going to have anybody making less than $250,000 a year is not going to see your taxes go up one penny." Well, of course, that was a flat-out lie, because all of our taxes went up, including mine. So, you know, once again, politicians lie, and liberal politicians lie worse. But here's the thing: the discussion centered around the what the panelists, the folks on the show, thought was quote unquote a fair share. Of course, you know, the president and the Democrats are all talking about, oh, well, you know, we think that the wealthy people should pay their fair share. I'm like, well, what do you call a fair share? I call a fair share equal. In other words, if you're basing it on a percentage, then you pay the same percentage as you pay, and you pay the same percentage as you pay, and so forth. To have a graduated system is not in my... I don't think there's any definition where that's fair. So, anyway, they asked for the opinions of, and most of these folks are pretty conservative, not all of them, what they felt for the wealthy a fair share was, and they almost to a T said 50%. I'm like, what? 50%? I'm like, God doesn't even ask for more than 10%. I was ready to throw a chair through the TV at that point. I'm like, I'm sorry. Fair means everybody's paying the same percentage. Okay, so there's no way in the world you can define it as anything else in my book. So if you're going to try to make the case, you can't with me, because it's that simple. So anyway, because early on, I've gotten screwed by the tax code more than once, and so we actually take out. We don't have any exception when we do our W-4. We don't do any exceptions, or I don't do any exemptions, and I actually have extra taken out because I will not get to the end of the year where I'm paying extra. We had one year where we had to pay in nearly $4,000. I was like, that's not going to happen again. So we had plenty of taken out. Well, and it almost turned out at the last second when they were going through all this ridiculous arguments, debates over what they were going to do with the taxes. It almost came down to, as I was calculating, that all the extra I was having taken out was going to let us break even this year. Fortunately, they figured out some compromise, even though it wasn't the right one, but it was a compromise. And so we actually did end up with a refund. And according to statistics, most people do get some sort of a refund. So the question you have to ask yourself, what kind of things should you do with your tax, with your refund? So we'll be exploring some things that, like our situation, what may have already obligated some of it, or what our plans are, what you might do with it as far as your tax refund, if you got a tax refund. But first off, mentioned earlier that our sometimes co-host Troy McGonagill was out of town this week, so he couldn't help us out with the podcast. He and the McGonagill clan, the family, are in San Diego attending or have attended the graduation of their son, Neal Vega, who just completed basic training or boot camp or whatever they call it for the U.S. Marine Corps. So we're very... Oops, that's not what we want to show there. Here we go. Where is he? There he is. So there is the family. You see Troy on the left there, and his wife, Jennifer, and their family. And there is the brand spanking new Marine Hua. As a Air Force veteran, I can appreciate that he's decided to, that Neal has decided to join the ranks of the military and offer up his services to defend our nation. Of course, I know, his mother, being like any other normal mother, just shudders at the thought that her son might actually go into battle. But, that is the risk that we take when we join the military. But it is a worthwhile service to our country, and it's the reason why we have the freedoms that we have. It's the reason why we're able to do the podcast, why we're able to own vehicles and homes and enjoy freedom of speech and the Second Amendment, at least until they start taking away aspects of the Second Amendment. All the freedoms that we enjoy, even to the point of, sometimes causing conflict. Doesn't matter. those freedoms exist because there are people like Neal who said, yep, I'm going to raise my hand. I'm going to take the oath. I'm going to put myself through the hell that is basic training and volunteer my services and potentially my life for my country. So we're proud of you, Neal Vega, for graduating the U.S. Marine Corps basic training. And I know you guys are having a little bit of vacation time there. We've seen a couple of videos that they've posted. Having a good time in San Diego. And wish you guys a safe trip back. And looking forward to seeing you next week. And I'm sure you may have, Troy may end up having some pictures, etc. Let me clear the decks here. He may have some pictures and maybe in some video that he wants to share in an upcoming episode. I'm definitely going to encourage him to share that with us because it's always kind of fun to see what our folks, our fellow divers, a little bits and pieces of their life. Because as much as we really, really love diving, it's not our entire life. We do other things. We have day jobs, we have families, and we do have life that goes on outside of diving. Although we try to incorporate diving as much as possible in every aspect of our life. If you came to visit our house, you would see our living room is quite replete with hints of beach life, dive life, that kind of thing. Maybe one of these days I'll take some snapshots and share those on an upcoming podcast. So again, congratulations to Neal Vega for a job well done, and look forward to hearing some great stories how basic training went. My wife and I both were Air Force, so we have some interesting basic training stories that we've shared with folks. So it's kind of neat now that he's gone through that. You know, we were able to share with him some things he might expect, although the Marine Corps basic training is certainly more challenging in just about every aspect than the Air Force basic training. Nonetheless, a lot of it is head games, and some of those head games are pretty consistent across the sister services. So I'm sure it'll be interesting now to hear his stories of how what we warned him about, how that played out in his basic training. That'll be interesting. Matter of fact, we might be able to get, if he's able to come back for a short visit, we might be able to get him on to share it. That would be kind of fun. So in other dive news, we've got Tara and I have gone to Curacao for a dive vacation. Love it there. We've shown pictures and video, and may show some others in future podcasts. Just love the island. Love the diving there. Found out that the reefs there at Curacao have now been added to the Google Collective as far as their Street View virtual diving platform. I've not actually seen what this looks like. I'm not a Google fan, but Google has their Street View. Well, they've added now, I guess, what would you call it, Sea View or Ocean View, where they get with videographers and photographers, and they take footage of various reefs. I guess they've got a pretty extensive panoramic of the Great Barrier Reef, and now they just added Curacao to that. So if you want to get an idea what the diving is like in some of those areas, check out Google's Street View virtual diving platform and check it out. Okay, so here we are, the weather's starting to shift. Unless you live somewhere above Amarillo, Texas, I guess. It's still kind of wintry. Y'all have been dealing with just insane storms, snowstorms this late in the year. I'm like, global warming? Yeah, right. Fortunately, it's been warming up pretty nicely here in Del Rio, although we've had these really wild swings where one day it's 100 degrees and the next it's in the 50s, which I hate that. I love the heat. I can't stand the cold. That's why I moved to Missouri. When I joined the Air Force, I chose San Antonio, or some bases in San Antonio first, and then Del Rio, and then basically I started picking all southern tier. I wanted nothing that was going to be cold, because I hate the cold that much. Grew up in Ohio and Missouri, so very familiar with the ice and the snow. Don't want any more of it. Thank you very much. But now that we're starting to get into the diving season, I've already been doing some diving. I don't think Scuba Bob's been in yet. I don't think he's been in yet. He is hopefully going to get back in the saddle after this weekend. He said he'll be pretty much done with all these events that he's working on. So he should be back in the swing of things. We'll hit the water. But you've seen in previous podcasts, hopefully, how low Lake Amistad has been getting. Well, this creates a number of issues, particularly for divers, because that means that the breadth of the lake is getting skinnier, because most of it is canyon. So as the lake level drops, all of that water that's left is in narrower and narrower areas, which means if you're going to dive, you are more likely to come across boats. Boats and diving they go hand in hand. Most of your really good diving is accomplished via access from boat, either diving from the boat or a boat that takes you to a location that then you can do some other shore diving, whatever. So Divers Alert Network, or DAN, has started a diver or dive flag awareness campaign. I can speak from experience. There at Lake Amistad, there is evidently no requirement for any kind of actual. You don't have to earn a captain's license or whatever certification. There's no requirement for you to actually learn the rules of the road, as it were, as far as driving a boat on Lake Amistad, which I think is a major foul, because there are so many boats out there, and there are enough of us who are divers and swimmers that when we're running the dive flag out there, we need to be relatively certain that folks aren't going to come zooming up on that and go, "Oh, what's that?" and then go and potentially take us out while we're diving. So Dan has got a new campaign that they're starting. Let me bring this up. They're trying to promote folks to put these posters basically anywhere there's like marines or marinas and boat docks, etc. And these are some of the basic rules of the road. Now, interestingly, I'm kind of surprised that they went with, on this poster, they went with only the United States version of the dive flag, because the international one is actually a blue and white flag. So, but of course, this is I've got both, but this is the one we typically fly. And so, some of the basic rules, it says for boaters, if you're in a river or channel or inlet and see a dive flag, keep your boat at least 100 feet from the dive flag. If you're in open water and see a dive flag, keep your boat at least 300 feet. So, I think in our situation, the 100-foot rule would be applying. And then for divers, there's flag etiquette. Remember to place your flag before submerging. Be sure to remove the flag when all divers exit. In other words, you don't want to, since you're creating an obstruction, as it were, or a detour situation for other boaters, you don't want to create that obstruction any longer than is necessary. So put it out there before you dive, and then when the last diver gets out, pull the flag so that everybody knows that it's clear and they can move on. Be sure to always surface within 100 feet of your dive flag. Now, when we are diving, if we're outside of Scuba Cove, which actually is a protected area, it's got buoys marked off, which, again, because there's no requirement to learn the rules of the road for boaters, they're not supposed to come inside the cove, inside the buoy line with powered craft. But too often they do, and I'm frequently yelling at them. Of course, they're like, they get all sorts of upset at me, and I'm like, I didn't write the rules, but we're diving here, so get out. Excuse me, but anytime we're diving outside of that protected area, we have to run a dive flag. So typically, I'm carrying the flag. I've got it on a tether on a reel, so I can let the reel out as we're diving. So we may be following along a rock wall or a cliff area, so boaters will see the flag and it's following behind us, because when we're diving at Lake Amistad, we want to dive and we want to see a number of things, and it's not a matter of we don't have an opportunity necessarily to drop the flag or plant the flag, anchor the line at a certain place, and just navigate around. We're following typically the shoreline, because that's where the things are to see. So we have to make sure that we have the dive flag towed behind us so they know where we're at, because we travel actually pretty good ways while we're cruising. What usually catches newer divers by surprise is the fact that underwater you can, without much effort, you can actually travel pretty far and pretty fast. Once you get down, you're actually much slower on the surface. So when you get down, you're cruising along. If you were to suddenly pop up halfway through your dive, you'd probably be pretty shocked at how far you got once you came to the surface and look back. Oh, wow, we were way over there. So you definitely want to make sure you have your flag with you. And so hopefully boaters are paying attention to the rules, and they're if you're in a more of an inlet or small lake area, they're staying that 100 feet away, or out in the ocean that they're staying 300 feet away. And Dan has a pretty good PSA. Let me pull that out. Let me throw on their PSA. Here we go.
Summertime often means boaters and divers are sharing the same waters. To ensure a safe and enjoyable experience, here are some tips to follow. Boaters, when you see a red flag with a white diagonal stripe, this means there are divers in the water. While state laws can vary, boaters should stay at least 100 feet away from a dive flag when in a river, inlet, or channel, and 300 feet away in open water. Divers, always service within 100 feet of your dive flag and remove it after exiting the water. So remember, be alert, be safe, and have fun.
That's right, be alert. We need more alerts. So anyway, yeah, so that's their PSA, which we'll probably see a number of places, hopefully any stations that talk about activities going on near lakes. You know, Lake Amistad, even with it being as low as it is well known for the bass fishing. So as they have these tournaments, wow, where'd that word come from? Tournaments, hopefully they'll be putting those kinds of PSAs on and putting those posters out. In fact, I may contact our local marina. Matter of fact, the only place I think you can let your boat in the water right now is Diablo East Marina at Lake Amistad. So I wonder if they have these posters. I think I may tell them about those and see if they can get some of those posted. I've heard some of the horror stories. Speaking of the lake being low and only one or two places available to put in your boat, I've heard some of the horror stories of folks, the insane long lines at Diablo East ramp, which now is very, very long. It's a long haul to get down there. Just a little over a year ago, you could go out there and park in the parking lot area, and it's a little bit of a walk, but nothing really bad. You could lug most of your gear down and onto the dock and onto the boat. Not now. Everybody just loads up, and then they truck down there in the boat, and then they launch the boat, and then the poor slug who's driving the towing vehicle has to make the long trek back down the ramp. So it's just a mess. I probably need to go out there and take some pictures of that as well. Share that so folks that are coming in from parts northeast, I guess you can't come from west, northeast and south to boat, fish, or dive at Amistad can see what they're in for. It's pretty sad. Matter of fact, I haven't been out there since the week before last, when I ran into one of my former students who is now a diver for the Park Service. He said that they were going to be letting another 12 to 15 feet out, so I haven't been out to the lake to see what that looks like. He did mention to me, though, that for those of you who are looking to dive in the local area, that Spur 454 is now open, which used to be a road that cut across the river, the lower lake when it wasn't nearly so full. And he was suggesting it might be a better area to teach some diving. So that was my big concern as I started doing some diving earlier this season, was that the distance from where you would park your vehicle to carrying your gear down is just crazy right now. It's just insane. And I thought I was in good shape, but not enough to lug the kind of as much equipment as we'd be lugging those kind of distances, as you may have seen from some of the pictures where we normally dive at Scuba Cove. So I'll be checking that out. I may take some pictures as well, kind of get an idea of how my classes are going to go this year. Again, April 15th is coming upon us. If you haven't already done your taxes, you need to get on the stick. We already did ours, and it actually came back pretty quick, and we got a pretty good chunk. I won't say how much, but we got a pretty good chunk. Of course, we were running into I was running into a few problems that threatened to, what should I say? Pre-obligate some of those funds, and it was depressing because we wanted to go on a dive trip this year. Last week, we talked about how we had the Street Beat, which was a Christian contemporary Christian music concert ministry event in Del Rio, and I discovered after the event that one of the keys on my keyboard, which I also use in our church service on Tuesdays for practice, Wednesdays for youth, and Sunday mornings, of course. One of my keys was no longer working. It literally was broken. So, of course, I've got regular service coming up, and we've got other ministry events with the band that I am also a part of. So I was afraid that if I couldn't fix the keyboard, I might be forced to spend some of the money on a replacement keyboard. So, needless to say, I was bound and determined to figure out some way to fix the keyboard. So, fortunately, today I was able to take the monster apart, post it on Facebook with the guts hanging out on the poor keyboard. For those who might be interested, that was my homage to Marco Rubio. For those who might be interested to know, I have a M-Audio Key Station Pro 88, which means it's got 88 keys, which is it's a behemoth. It's huge. And I really love the keyboard. It's got weighted keys, so it feels closer to a real piano. It took me a while to get used to that because I'm used to playing a Roland A30 76 key keyboard, but it's got, it's velocity sensitive, meaning it senses how hard I press the keys. It's very much what they call a synthesizer action. Keys, so you can move really fast on them. It took me a little while to get used to playing a fully weighted keyboard, but now I'm so used to it that I kind of prefer it for the most part. There are a few cases where I would prefer the synth action, but be that as it may, I was able to take the thing apart, and through very careful recovery of the parts that were broken, I was surprised that I found them because some of the pieces were so small. And judicious use of epoxy, I was able to repair the key. And so far it's working. It'll sit overnight, ready for a church service tomorrow. Hopefully it's be fully functional. I'm hoping. It holds together. The way I play the keyboard is pretty heavy-handed, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes tomorrow. So that threatened to at least eat up anywhere from $500 to $1,000, but so far I'm now risk-free of that. Well, in addition to that, we here at the studio, we have a full-blown network. I wonder if I think, well, you really can't see. We have a actual file server that actually, the SETIFox.net website and the DelRioDiveClub.com website are both hosted on. So I actually host them here. And our email server is also here. So we have a full-blown network. You have the studio, which I think several episodes ago we did show at least the studio video. Perhaps not. I need to look back on the archives. But we have, of course, the main workstation here where we do all of the actual podcasting work, the pre- and post-production, etc. Then, of course, the main file server that hosts the websites and most of our data. And then our email server, and then we also have I have a testing platform workstation, which used to be my primary. I kind of hand me down from my primary to a testing mode, any machines that I have. And then, of course, we have the laptop that I use all the time, which eventually will be replaced, or at least will be superseded by a Windows 8 tablet. Oh, I have somebody else asking to come up here. I thought I did. Thought I heard whining. Yeah, I want to go with the tablet. I was going to go with the Surface Pro, but the battery life just isn't where it needs to be. But I'm holding out. Until then, I have my trusty laptop, which actually serves as a mobile podcasting platform. Believe it or not, it's just got enough power running one HD camera that you can do an okay job of podcasting with this XSplit software. We actually use that for our church. We've started live streaming our church service on Sundays. So anyway, so I have it. My wife has her laptop that she uses for her craft room. You ought to see her craft room. You talk about it. She calls it her lair. It's quite a studio in its own right. Laptop with all of her scrapbooking supplies very well organized. Her devices for actually creating. She's got this thing called a Cricut that actually it's kind of like a printer. It's almost like a 3D printer. It's able to cut out the shapes, lettering, etc. for all of her scrapbooking designs. I mean, I tell you, you could spend as much for the gadgets and toys that she has for her scrapbooking as I probably could for the studio here. But she has a great time with it. But and of course she has her TV mounted on the wall that she has all that connected to, and her sound system and everything. So it's like her own little studio. And then of course we have our Blu-ray player and our satellite disk receiver that a satellite dish receiver that also has hard disk recording on it, DVR, and all of this is networked. Our entire house is networked. So, and media's streaming left and right. There's bits flying everywhere. It's crazy. Cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. So, unfortunately, I say all that to say this. Unfortunately, had a problem where I came in after work and saw the main file server had locked up. Well, that happens on occasion. Usually if there was some oddball update, because I've got it set as you should. I've got it set to automatically download and install updates from Microsoft, because most of those are security or just enhancements. So I've got it set to automatically download and install, and once in a while they'll send one out that has evidently happened this last Tuesday. That was an It wasn't a very good update. So I thought, okay, no big deal. So I restarted the machine, and it came up. I thought it was fine. Well, then I noticed later it stopped responding. It locked up again. So to make a long story not as long, eventually discovered that both the primary hard drive and the system board are having problems. So I'm like, okay, I've got our entire music collection on there, or nearly our entire music collection on there. We've got all of our pictures and videos from vacations and all sorts of events. And again, since my wife is a scrapbooker, she takes pictures incessantly, and all of it gets stored there. So the thought that might be destroyed or corrupted was kind of disconcerting. And while I do have things backed up on an external, that's still kind of a little unnerving. And plus the fact that I had no system that since the server was down, I couldn't access the data. So I used my my backup, my testing unit, which is currently running Windows 8 Pro, and slaved the primary hard drive to pull all the data off, the most current data. Fortunately, after a couple of tries, I was able to get it all off of there. And so I thought, you know what, I'll look into the feasibility of no longer hosting that on the server, but actually using Windows 8 as a home server. I had read a number of places where a number of the features that people used to use in the old Windows home server, which was just a subdued version of the regular Windows server 2012 or 2011, whatever it is. And since they no longer make home server, I thought, well, maybe enough of the features are there that I could just use Windows 8 as a server. And it turns out it actually can do a pretty good job of just getting a handle around it. So I've got all the data actually now available on a Windows 8 machine configured to be the home group server with streaming. So I can actually do the Play 2, for those who are familiar with the Play 2 or DLNA functionality. I can actually stream that to any device that's compatible, including our Blu-ray player, which is pretty cool. So I'll be kind of working with that as far as data storage. Now it remains to be seen exactly how I'm going to migrate the websites. So I'm exploring a couple of different variations on a theme on what I want to do with that to get the websites back up. So having said that, if you try to go to delriodiveclub.com, you will not get a response because the server that hosted it is down right now. So I'll post on Facebook and we'll share more on the podcast, etc. So definitely check us out on Facebook /Del Rio Dive Club, and we'll keep you posted on that. So anyway, I thought at first, when I realized the server was kaputski, that might be an additional cost that I had not planned on. But I think I'm going to be able to do this on the other machine that was a Windows 8. Now, what I am going to be spending some of the money, our refund on, is, some of you may be happy to know, I will be replacing our main workstation here, which currently is running at the ragged edge of pushing a 720p recording and streaming of our podcast. I've got 3 Microsoft HD quality life cams. One's the cinema, and then 2 of them, the primary, the ones that focus on me and Scuba Bob, if he were here, are the life cam studios. They're a little bit higher end HD cameras. And then the cinema, which we use for our wide shots here. That's the cinema that's taking the shot right now. Excuse me. So with all of this, and then bringing in YouTube videos and playing videos that we've recorded, like from diving, etc., and pictures, all of this takes a toll on the machine as far as handling cycles. And I bring up the performance monitor. If you bring up on Windows 8 and Windows 7, if you bring up the task manager, I probably can't show that here. If you bring up task manager, you can actually see what what work your processor's doing. You can see what percentage of it is being used. And once we get things really moving, a lot of activity going on with the podcast, I'm running between 95 and 100%. Which is why you see choppiness, etc. So I actually want to smooth that out and give myself some more headroom so the processing is much faster. So we'll be upgrading this machine with a much more powerful computer. And then I'll relegate this one either to focus just on the recording studio side of things, or I may make it the new testing computer, since the current testing computer has now become our network server. We're running Windows 8. But that's not going to be very expensive. I can actually get a really good deal based on my research. And then the other thing for sure we're going to be acquiring with our refund, and we've talked about this before, is the Sea Life DC 1400 Pro Duo camera, underwater camera. For under $1,000, that camera takes 14 megapixel pictures, full HD video, and has both a included photograph strobe and a video light. And why it's called the Pro Duo. So it's got 2 arms on it. So let me switch cameras here. So it's got the 2 arms. One arm has the strobe light. So when you're taking pictures, it syncs up the flash, so you get a nice, recolors your photographs. And then the video light is constant, so that when you're taking video of something, it recolors the subject that you're taking pictures or taking video of. And we're just really excited about that. You know, you've seen the video, which I'm going to be showing a little bit of video from one of our Florida trips, taken with our current Intova IC10 video camera. As a matter of fact, why don't I just go ahead and show that? Dun, dun, dun. There we go. And start. So this camera is unfortunately only capable of doing standard VGA video. It does great, 10 megapixel photographs, but the video is only VGA quality. So we're anxious to be able to do full HD video as well as really, really good quality pictures. This was one of our many, many dives that we did several years ago in Florida Keys. This is a huge school of baby fish that my wife is getting ready to approach. It's just so neat how they move in concert. It's beautiful to watch. And she couldn't get very close to them. They would just move out of the way. It was so cool. just, I mean, this is just mesmerizing. And they just move out of the way, and then they come back together. Now you can see at such a low resolution, I mean, this is great to capture the memory, but it's such a low resolution. And while this was fairly shallow, I can't recall if that was taken at the beginning of the dive before we got to deeper area, or if it was basically when we're finishing up the dive and you kind of hang shallow for your 15-foot, 3-minute interval. But so there was plenty of light to still see a lot of color. But as you go deeper, anybody who's been diving knows, as you go deeper, the spectrums changes because the water filters out the very spectrum. Pretty soon you lose your reds, etc., and then all you're left with is the blue-green at the end. So that's why we have flash, and that's why we have video lights to reintroduce, to put light back in so you don't lose the color. So any photographs that you see taken at night or at depth, have to be done. If you want to see all the brilliant colors, they're done with judicious use of flash or video light. And so this camera that we're going to get is really going to step up our game, and it's really going to drive me to learn more about underwater photography and videography, and we'll probably be sharing that adventure with you all on the podcast, because everybody benefits from learning more about what you can do underwater. It's not just about swimming around and gawking. You want to take those adventures home with you. So what other things can you do, or should you think about doing with your refund? Well, you could do exactly what I did with when I first got into diving, was purchased my first set of gear. Right now there are a lot of really good specials. You've heard us talk about leisurePro.com and diverssupply.com. That's divers-supply.com, and they have tons of really, really good package deals. If you have not purchased your gear yet, even if you've been a long time diver but you've just resisted, why not take just a small portion of your refund and invest in that gear? I guarantee you, if you have that gear, if you have your gear, you're going to dive more frequently, because you're not looking for a place to get gear. You have it. And as I said, you may have dive shops around you. If you want to get the most for your dollar, going online really is the best way to do it. If you go to Leisure Pro, for example, right now, they have a pretty good deal. They have tons, but they have a pretty good deal for $625. You can get this what they call a basic package 2. It's got the Ocean Pro, or the Oceanic, weight integrated BC. I absolutely strongly suggest you get a weight integrated BC instead of using the weight belts. It's just so much easier to work the gear. So you get the weight integrated BC, and then you get the which model is this? This is the Alpha 8 SP5 regulator and accompanying Octo. The Octopus or Octo is the one you see on the left there. It's yellow. So, I mean, this is a no-frills, excuse me, this is a no-frills regulator. There's no special adjustments on it. But that's fine for your first set of gear, just to get you where you're diving. Oceanic makes some good stuff. We use their computers. As a matter of fact, speaking of computers, you see in the console they got the slim line with the pressure gauge, and then the yellow portion, that's your dive computer. That's the VEO or VO, I'm not sure how they pronounce it, VEO 100, which is basically, it's their base model computer, but it does everything you need. I mean, it tells you your depth, tells you the time you can stay at that depth. It records your dive. tells you how much time you can spend at whatever depth you're at. It will give you an alarm for when you're ascending too fast. It has a little meter on it to let you know if you're ascending within safe parameters, and a 3-minute stop. So once you cross about with the Oceanics, they typically will flag you as soon as you cross about 19 feet. They'll start a 3-minute countdown and change. So the display changes and shows you 15, and it's basically suggesting here's your countdown for 3 minutes to hang there. And that will actually, even though we teach in PADI that you want to do that after, if you go down to 90 feet, Oceanic computers flag that at basically any dive. If you go below 20 feet for any kind of time, it will go ahead and start flagging you for a safety stop, if you so choose. Obviously there's no scuba police, so they can, there's nobody going to arrest you if you don't. But having a computer that helps keep you honest, that's pretty cool. So Leisure Pro has this package, and there are other packages available with different combinations for $625. And you get a ball cap. You get a ball cap. Wow, what a deal. So that's one thing you could buy. $625, and you've got a full set of gear. All you need are tanks and weights. That's it. And so you could typically get the tanks wherever you're going to go diving. Eventually I suggest you still get your own tanks as well. I got my tanks right off the bat. So I was always ready. I even actually made, this is a kind of interesting story, actually made my first weight bags. Because I was, I pretty much spent every bit of disposable income to get my first set of gear, which was actually twice as expensive as that set of gear. That shows you how much the price has come down on stuff. I had really no money left to speak of for extra stuff, but I needed weights. So I went to, I don't necessarily recommend this, but if you really are in dire straits and you're as, what's the word I'm looking for? You have ingenuity to spare. What I did was I went to these tire shops that, they replace tires, tons of tires. Well, one of the things that they always pull off the old wheel are the little lead weights for balancing. So they literally had thousands of pounds of this lead weight, and they would sell it to me for pennies. They just wanted, because they were going to have to get rid of it anyway. So I brought a little hand scale, and I bought basically a box of the discarded lead weights, and then took all the extra pieces off, so it was just the lead. And using the scale, I measured out 2 pounds, 3 pounds, 5 pounds of lead, and then I actually got old blue jeans that I'd long since really torn up. They were no longer really usable in any way, in a decent fashion. Certainly couldn't go leave the house in them. And I sewed the lead into those pouches. So I actually made my own weight pouches to go diving in. It worked out great until eventually, a couple of years later, I finally broke down and bought some lead weights. And now I've got lead weight out the gazoo. I have much more than I actually would even use for students, but that's fine. So that's just one way. There are ways to save yourself money if you really have a good imagination and a little ingenuity. So anyway, you can get your tanks and weights later, but I definitely recommend that you get your own first set of gear. So that's a good way to utilize your tax refund to get yourself going with that. What else? Well, if you're already a diver and you're looking to get into either night diving or you're wanting to augment what you have for day diving, We've talked about this before. Scuba Bob and I, we dive with what we call a BC light, which is a smaller handheld size. Do I have anything? I mean, they make BC lights that are as small as this. Let me switch cameras here. They make BC lights that are as small as this or a little bit larger. This isn't a BC light, but they make them this small and a little bit larger. And they have, similar kind of, see if I can show this. They have a similar kind of mechanism for you to tie them via a lanyard or something to your BC. We have ours attached via lanyard to our BCs. I think Scuba Bob has his on just on a regular non-stretchable lanyard on a D-ring. I actually have a retractor, which makes it convenient because it's mounted right here on my shoulder. And if I need it, if we're diving even during the day and we're looking inside a small cave or something I want to see, it's going to be darker in there. So I just pull the ripcord. I just pull it loose, pull it out, turn it on. I can shine it in the cave, and then all I have to do is turn it off and let go, and it goes right back to the BC. Very convenient. Excuse me. But the technology for dive lights is getting better and better every year. LED is, if not the most popular, it's certainly quickly gaining to become the most popular now, because they're very bright and use a lot less power. So you can get a lot brighter light using less, smaller batteries, less number of batteries, so it brings your weight down and easier to manipulate. And I saw that a company called Triton is now making available what they say it's impossible to flood this light. Now, as a diver, I can tell you, replacing the batteries is not a big deal, but there are O-rings in these. When you take apart the unit, there are O-rings that you have to make sure are free of debris and are properly lubricated with some sort of a silicone grease, so that when you put them back together, they fill in any gaps, any irregularities, so that water doesn't get into the battery compartment and kill the light. So obviously that can be a very annoying and costly, because the dive lights are not cheap, costly mistake if you don't have it sealed properly. So to make the claim that they have that it is impossible to flood this thing, Triton is stepping out there. And this thing is called the dry lights, the Triton dry light. I think I have a picture. Here we go. And you see it's got a little attachment for the lanyard around the wrist. It's twist activated, evidently. $129, which really isn't bad at all. It's 135 lumens, so for a smaller BC type light, 135 lumens is good. But it uses lithium-ion batteries, so they're rechargeable. But here's the part: it uses induction in order to charge. So you don't plug it in. In other words, it's kind of like how my Lumia 920 phone can do wireless charging. I just literally set it down on the pad, so there's no actual electrical contact per se. It's just induction. So this evidently uses something similar in order to recharge. Now, I will say, as someone who uses a lot of things that rely on lithium-ion batteries, I'm wondering how long this thing would last before it stops being able to charge and hold a charge for very long. I've not seen any stats on it, so to tell you what the battery life, as far as number of charges and how long each charge lasts. But if you are at all concerned about getting water into your light, and you have obligated $129 in your tax refund, this might be a worthwhile investment. I definitely recommend that folks, divers, do dive with a BC light all the time. Especially if it's a LED, those are a lot of times bright enough that you might be able to use those as augment your signaling capability on the surface too. So if you need to get a boat's attention or something like that, you can turn that thing on and flash it. Triton Dry Light, 135 lumens BC type light for $129. Not a bad investment there. So those are just some ideas of some things that you can spend your money on. Like I said, if you don't have your own gear, there's just no sense. There's no reason not to go ahead and get your first set of gear. Certainly wouldn't hurt to upgrade your gear. If you've already got a set and maybe you've had it for a while. We've gone diving with people who they've held on to BCs long past their expiration date. We're talking, you're diving behind them and you see little trail of bubbles coming out from a seam or where the power inflator connects or something. Time to upgrade. Or if you were running a purely an analog setup where you've just got your depth gauge, which is analog, your pressure gauge, maybe upgrade to a computer. You can get into dive computers really inexpensive now, for $200. You can upgrade to an actual dive computer. I tell you, there's nothing like switching from diving strictly dive tables and depth gauge, pressure gauge, and your trusty dive watch. There's nothing like switching from that to diving by computer. You can dive longer with a computer because it's constantly tracking where you are in the vertical column in the water. Dive tables and your watch are designed for you to go to drop down to the depth you're going to dive, stay there for a time, and come up. It's a very, very predictable profile. But the truth is, when you're diving, you're going to see a number of things, and so you may move even just a couple of feet, a few feet up or down in the water column while you're diving. So why not take advantage of that fact, because that you gain some time back, but when you come up for a bit. So you're actually off-gassing some, or you're at least reducing your saturation rate by coming up shallower. So the computer's tracking that constantly. It's following every bit of the changes that you're making in your dive profile. So you can technically, and we've done this before, you can dive within the limits of the dive computer and still technically bust your tables. Because if you were to look strictly at the dive computer where it shows what your max depth was, well, obviously you typically will not have spent all of your dive time at that max depth. That was just the farthest down that you got, but some of it you may have actually done multi-level diving and you worked your way up. Well, the computer is tracking all that, so you get all of that extra time that if you just strictly went by the tables, your 75 feet or whatever depth you went for X number of minutes, that's, you get a lot shorter time. So if you're diving analog gauges, it's certainly worthwhile to maximize your dive time, because that's why we do it. We want to be underwater. We want to spend as much time as we can. We want that bottom time. We don't want to spend all of our time on the surface intervals. So if you're running analog gauges, I highly recommend you might take some of your tax return and spend it on updating your console to computer. Well, we're already 9:16 in the evening, Central Time. Let's hit some administrivia before we sail on out of here. Okay, we got coming up, we've got 18 April, we've got our dive club meeting at Rudy's Restaurant, 7 p.m. Be there or be square. And we have Balmorhea State Park dive trips on May 17th through the 19th, June 14th through the 16th, July 19th through the 21st, and August 16th through the 18th. And weather and water in the lake permitting, we will have basic open water classes scheduled the 23rd through the 26th of May, 27th through the 30th of June, 25th through the 28th of July, 22nd through the 25th of August, and 26th through the 29th of September. As we mentioned earlier, our because the server's down, you can't get to our dive club website, which is normally at delriodiveclub.com. But you can check us out on our Facebook page, Facebook.com/Del Rio Dive Club. You can also send us messages via Skype, because now Microsoft has integrated their Messenger with Skype. So actually you can send me a direct message, or us to a direct message via Skype. Just connect to Two Guys Who Dive. Or you can send us an email at tgwd@outlook.com. And, of course, you can send me email at robert.wade@setifox.net, because that server's still working. And you can follow me on Twitter at robertcfp. So, well, looking forward to having Scuba Bob back here next week. And maybe we'll have Troy McGonagill in here as well to share his little adventure. You know, I would have liked to have seen him take his some of his gear with him so he could maybe pull in a dive. But then I remembered that being the West Coast, that's some cold water. Because for those who might not know, the way the oceans circulate, the upper hemisphere. And this is getting into a little bit of science here. The upper hemisphere is clockwise. So the warm waters that that hit the equatorial plane, they're warm as they come up along Japan and China, etc. Then they hit the Bering Strait and Alaska, and they chill, and so they come down on our west coast. So that water flow is actually coming down, even though the tropical winds, etc., coming from the west are warm. The water itself is actually cold because it's flowing from north to south. Whereas if you go to the Atlantic Ocean, it's the upper hemisphere is clockwise. So as it comes down along Europe and the Middle East, all of that, it's cold, just like it would be on our west coast. Then it hits the equator and comes across, hits the Caribbean area, and it's all warm. So that's why we have our hurricanes. If you look at the hurricane paths, they all start around the upper left portion of Africa. And so they cruise along, they're following the flow, and they're cruising along the equator, and then they ride up. If they don't push on through into the Caribbean, they actually flow right up along our coast and head up towards Nova Scotia and ultimately up to Greenland. So because that flow is clockwise. So that's why we have all those hurricanes over there. So yeah, having said that, I thought, well, probably wouldn't be a good idea for Troy to try and dive over there, because the water would be pretty chilly. But nonetheless, I'm sure they're having a good time, just judging by the pictures and the video that we've seen already. It looks like they are, and hopefully he'll be able to be with us maybe next weekend and share some of his adventures and talk about the whole graduation ceremony for Neal, surviving boot camp and now as a United States Marine. So we always love hearing from you. If you've got any ideas, suggestions, comments, questions, etc., send us an email, or we definitely would like to have you involved in our chat room. We always have the chat room active, and we're watching it to see if you have any comments or questions, because we'll do it. We'll discuss it live right on the podcast, and then you'll be forever captured in digits in our podcast when we upload those to YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And so that pretty much does it for this week. So I will see you, along with at least Scuba Bob and possibly Troy McGonagill. We'll see you next week. Another exciting episode of Two Guys Who Dive.